This story took place in the year 2020. The body of 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque was found with multiple stab wounds. Her death caused a huge public outcry, with people demanding that the Canadian authorities explain how this could have happened.
Marilyn Levesque.
De Marilyn Levesque.
De Marilyn Levesque.
De Marilyn Levesque.
Marilyn Levesque.
De Marilyn Levesque.
De Marilyn Levesque.
Marilyn Levesque.
Murder of a young woman in Quebec City. Marilyn Levesque.
Marilyn was born in 1997 to Corinne Levesque and François Goulet, who separated shortly after her birth. Those close to her described her as kind, outgoing, and always friendly. Originally from Chicoutimi, Marilyn grew up partly with her mother and partly in foster homes. Chicoutimi is one of 3 municipalities in the Saguenay metropolitan area of the Canadian province of Quebec. She left her hometown for Quebec when she was 17 and returned after a breakup with her boyfriend. From then on, she commuted between the 2 cities, coming to the capital 2 or 3 days a week for work. Since she did not yet have a driver's license, she took the bus or used carpool services. By early 2020, she was living with her new boyfriend, Gabriel Truchon, in the Chicoutimi district, about 130 miles from Quebec. According to Gabriel, Marilyn dreamed of a stable life and wanted to take the plunge into the field of architecture. But on January 22, 2020, everything changed. It was a Wednesday, and Marilyn was in Quebec. Her trip was work-related, and Gabriel stayed in Chicoutimi. At about 9 o'clock in the evening, Gabriel became seriously worried because he could not reach Marilyn. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact his girlfriend, Gabriel began texting Marilyn's co-workers, hoping someone had seen her. But soon, Gabriel himself received a call from an unknown number. When he answered, the caller identified himself as a police officer and told him that Marilyn had been found dead. Later, forensic experts determined that she died of multiple stab wounds, of which there were more than 50 on her body. To continue looking at Marilyn's story, we need to go back 17 years. In 2003, 32-year-old Chantal Deschênes, a bartender at a hotel in Quebec, met 36-year-old Eustacio Galés, who also worked at the hotel and was her boss, in charge of the guests' meals. Soon after meeting, Chantal and Eustacio began a torrid romance. At the time, Chantal was the mother of 2 girls, ages 10 and 6, with whose father she had not lived for several years. As for Eustacio, he had been married to Joanne Lafrance since 1996, and they had 3 children. The relationship between the couple seems to have been rather uneasy. For example, 2 or 3 times in moments of anger, Eustacio broke down walls in their house. On one occasion, while they were traveling through Ottawa, he attacked his wife and was arrested and spent 7 days in jail. Despite the incidents described and other instances of verbal abuse, Joanne Lafrance claimed that she was not afraid of her husband and described him as a good father to their 3 children, although he did not always spend time with his family because of his demanding job. When the romance between Eustacio and Chantal began, he left his wife Joanne and their 3 children and moved in with his new sweetheart. The rapidly developing relationship was formalized. Chantal and Eustacio were married. At first, as is often the case, everything went well for the couple. Eustacio got along well with Chantal's children, and they spent their time together, going to the movies, the ice rink, and other entertainment venues on weekends. However, the relationship began to deteriorate as quickly as it had begun. At the same time, Galese was working more than 60 hours a week. He warned his supervisors that he would quit his job on December 31, 2004, because he could no longer tolerate the pressures of his job as food and beverage manager at the hotel. However, he did not speak to his employer about the difficulties he was experiencing on a personal level. The relationship between Eustacio Galese and Chantal Deschênes was very complicated and often tumultuous in recent months. Some witnesses described the man as very jealous, while others said that both Eustacio and Chantal were possessive and often argued about it. Friends of the couple said that Eustacio Galese would raise his voice but not physically abuse Chantal Deschênes, although she would insult him or even slap him. The tension in the relationship climaxed on October 21, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's 2 daughters were still asleep. They spent the evening with Joannie Heon, their babysitter, who slept over at their house because their mother worked the night shift. From the couple's conversation, Joannie learned of the night's argument between them. The babysitter left the house around 7:15 a.m., and the children were supposed to go to school around 8 a.m. Before leaving for school, the girls went in to greet their mother, who was in the bedroom with Eustachio. It was the last time they saw their mother alive. At 1:29 p.m., Eustachio Gallese was at the home of his ex-wife, Joanna LaFrance, where he had gone to drop off all of his cash savings. At this point, he called the police and confessed that he had killed his wife Chantal. At 1:39 p.m., the police arrived at Joanne LaFrance's home, where Gallese repeated his confession and surrendered without resistance. He then insisted that the police arrive at the school as soon as possible before Chantal's 2 daughters returned home and discovered their mother's body. At the same time, the police went to Chantal Deschênes' home, where they found her bloody body lying on the bed in her bedroom. Next to the body, the police found 2 knives with bloodstains on them and a hammer with the handle broken in 2. An autopsy revealed that the woman died of multiple hammerhead injuries and multiple stab wounds. The blows with the hammer were so severe that the handle broke. At his trial in 2006, a jury found Eustachio Gallese guilty of second-degree murder. He admitted that his motive for committing the crime was that Chantal had decided to leave him. Gallese was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. In 1997, he spent 7 days in jail for assaulting his first wife, Joanne LaFrance. In 2004, he killed his second wife, Chantal Deschênes. It can be concluded that Gallese had a tendency to abuse women. Despite this, 15 years later, in March 2019, the parole board concluded that Gallese's risk of reoffending was low enough that it decided to release him. As part of his parole strategy, Gallese was allowed to date women to satisfy his sexual needs. The parole officer developed a strategy that determined the amount of contact Gallese could have with women. He was allowed to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month to satisfy his sexual needs, but was prohibited from engaging in romantic relationships. He was also required to observe a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. unless he was attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. However, his control was so weak that he visited the massage parlor several times a week instead of once a month. Recall that he was released in March 2019. In June, while visiting an erotic massage parlor, Gallese, 51, met 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque, who worked there. Marilyn's relatives, for the most part, knew that she made her living providing intimate services for money, but she told them little about it, and when she did, it was usually to make fun of it or to mention it lightly. Those close to her described her as a sensitive girl. She also became very rigid about her work. Part of her wanted to change her life and quit that job, her relatives believe. But it's not easy to go back to minimum wage when you're used to earning the equivalent of 2 weeks' work in 2 hours. How did she end up in prostitution? The circumstances are unclear, but one thing is clear. Marilyn had a difficult childhood. She was repeatedly placed in foster homes. Marilyn's boyfriend and close friends knew where she worked and exactly what she was being paid for. According to her friends, she wasn't proud of her job, but she wasn't ashamed of it either, and always talked about it openly. Marilyn's boyfriend didn't mind that she made money this way because she worked in Quebec, 100 miles from their home. Gallese, who had virtually no one to supervise him, began visiting the massage parlor several times a week. Although the man gave the parole board the impression of a reformed man, his nature remained the same. On several occasions, he resorted to violence against female employees, as a result of which he was forbidden to come to the massage parlor. None of the staff knew that Gallese was a criminal, let alone that he had been in prison for the murder of his wife. In late summer 2019, when it was revealed that Gallese had assaulted several women at a massage parlor, the parole board banned him from visiting erotic massage parlors under threat of jail time. But by this time, Galese had fallen in love with Marilyn and came up with a workaround. He offered the girl 1,300 Canadian dollars for a meeting in a hotel room, and she agreed. It was their first meeting outside a massage parlor, and it went off without any problems. Galese felt so much sympathy for Marilyn that he began to share his emotional feelings with her. He told her that he missed his wife very much and mourned for 15 years, but did not specify that he himself had taken her life. Shortly thereafter, Eustacio Galese began to have the impression that the young woman was drifting away from him and that their relationship was deteriorating. He began to feel rejected, which made him anxious and jealous. The man made another hotel appointment for January 22, 2020. Marilyn told her boyfriend that she avoids meetings in hotels and prefers massage parlors where there are guards to protect the workers from trouble and to kick the client out the door if there are any problems. However, the $2,000 offered to Galese this time forced the young woman to agree to another meeting at the hotel. At 5 p.m., Galese and Marilyn were seen in the restaurant of the hotel, located in southwestern Quebec. After dinner, around 8:30 p.m., the couple went to their room, and at 11:35 p.m., Galese showed up at the police station and, similar to the 2004 case, confessed to the murder. The police immediately went to the hotel, hoping that Marilyn might still be alive. Unfortunately, she was already dead. At the autopsy, 57 stab wounds were found on her body. It was determined that Galese spent about 2 hours at the bar before turning himself in to police and also got rid of the murder weapon and Marilyn's cell phone. What happened was terrible in itself, but in this case the identity of the perpetrator, his past and the background to his new atrocity caused a huge resonance in society, which demanded answers from the authorities. Secretary of Public Safety Bill Blair offered his condolences to Marilyn's family and said her death could have been prevented. Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Labelle said she wanted to know how a violent criminal like Galese was granted parole. She also questioned whether the officers who worked with Galese had sufficient training to assess public safety risks and called on Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair to investigate the situation. Another commission was set up to investigate the parole board's actions and found deficiencies in the first board's work, case management, and supervision of the offender. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada said Marilyn's death was a terrible tragedy that should never have happened. He also promised that the Correctional Service of Canada, together with the parole board, would take important steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Despite the high-profile statements, however, as in most such cases, no one was seriously punished. Some of the parole board employees have been transferred to other positions, and some have been sent for refresher courses. There is no way to bring the young woman back, and it is hoped that her death will give pause to those who make decisions with serious consequences. As a result of a settlement agreement between the authorities and Marilyn's family, the government paid compensation for her death. The agreement prevented a lawsuit by Marilyn's relatives, but the amount of compensation was not disclosed because of confidentiality agreements. It should be noted that there were those who condemned the victim because of her professional activities. Galese was originally charged with second-degree murder, but when it was discovered that he had planned the crime and purchased the knife in advance, he was charged with first-degree murder. Galese pleaded guilty, admitting that he had planned the murder in advance. At his trial in February 2020, the prosecutor told the court that Galese had feelings for Marilyn and became jealous and angry when he realized that he was only a way for her to make money. Jealousy was found to be the main motive for the murder. On February 27, 2020, 51-year-old Eustacio Galese was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. This time he will have the right to apply for parole not after 15 years, as after the murder of his wife, but only after 25 years. Do you think that if Galese lives to be 76 years old, he will be released again? Write your opinion in the comments.